Hi, Jodi Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and a certified information privacy professional, and I help provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cybersecurity and privacy challenges throughout the life cycle of their business. I do that through identifying the problem and coming up with practical, implementable solutions that take in consideration the business itself. I am a cybersecurity subject matter expert and business attorney.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e commerce, media agencies, professional and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there is greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com.
And so I'm excited about today's episode because during this pandemic, I decided that I wanted to do something that I'd never done before, and that was buy a drone and start to study to get my commercial drone pilot's license. And so today I wanted to bring on Michael Hill, who is the CEO and founder of Cumulus Technology, a UAS drone consultancy based out of Dallas, Texas. He is an FAA Part 107 certified drone pilot, having flown over 3,000 missions. In addition, Michael is the legislative chairman for the North Central Texas UAS Task Force and a senior member of the Civil Air Patrol National UAS Rescue Team. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. That's a lot of words, but thank you.
It is a lot of words.
That was a lot of words. And for our audience, this is how it played out. One day in our house, I said, Jodi, I've always been excited. I've wanted to fly planes. I love aviation. How about I get my commercial pilot's license?
No.
Well, what if I got my license, but I stand on the ground and just remote control? Because it would be a drone pilot's license. What do you think of that?
Those are toys.
Can I do it or not?
You can try it.
That's kind of how the conversation went down. And that's how I got to meet Michael earlier this year. And I said, hey, Michael, this drone stuff is really cool. Would you teach me what I need to know so that I could be a 107 pilot such as yourself? And he said, yeah, so that's what I've been doing since October. So really excited to have you today, Michael. And the thing that I want to talk about first is your story about how you started your business and where you are today is a fascinating one. So I'd love if you could share your background.
Well, unfortunately, my wife didn't just come out and say no. That probably would have been a good thing, as much money as I've spent on drones in the last 5 years in business. So it probably would have been a good thing. But my story is very similar as yours. I worked for Microsoft and was in the tech industry for a bunch of years and just got tired of dealing with the tech world, wanted to do something different. And my middle daughter, Aubrey, was flying those little toy drones, and she'd show me, and I'd crash it and get frustrated and go, I can't do that. So she just kept teaching me how to fly, and I got bit by the drone bug and decided, well, maybe this could be something. So I practiced every day. My skills kept getting better. I'd get bigger drones and just kept crashing them and flying them and learning. And then a client had approached me and said, hey, did those things do videos and pictures? And I said, sure. He said, show me. So I did a little video, a 4K video for them. And they said, oh, that's interesting. We've got over 200 buildings that we would like to have virtual tours done using drones, photos inside, drone shots outside. So I said, great, signed the contract. And I spent the first year traveling to all these facilities around Texas and Louisiana, learning how to fly drones, taking pictures for this new client that I got. So it was just kind of, I fell into it and I got paid to fly drones for, the first year that I was in it.
So I'm glad to hear that Justin's not the only one who has crashed a drone. I think what I found really interesting when I learned about what you did and was the type of services that you provide. I had never thought about people want to fly over the tops of buildings before. So what are some of the other types of services that you've provided, or the types of companies, or reasons someone has needed the professional drone, as opposed to Justin right now in the backyard scaring the dog kind of drone?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So I attribute it to being the Wild West, and I'm a gunslinger. So, the industry is evolving so much. I do consultancy with schools and municipalities, helping them build out drone programs, or, educational programs to help the kids to move into manned and unmanned aviation careers. I work with a handful of large companies of integrating drones for drone deliveries. I do thermal imaging, nighttime imaging of buildings so they can see energy loss out of their buildings, mapping of properties and 3D modeling. I've trained over 28 law enforcement agencies on how to fly drones. So you see, it's quite a bit. There's over 300 industries that currently are using drones in some aspect for surveillance or imaging or whatever it may be. So it's really interesting. I've been fortunate enough to make a good name for my brand and my company, that we just go out and fly these type of missions, whether it be oil and gas or power, or mapping or surveillance, or whatever. So there's quite an industry that has started to grow and just flourish in the last 5 years.
So, Michael, it's funny you mentioned delivery, because I sometimes think that my wife's habits with Amazon personally keeps them incredibly profitable. And one of the big things people talk about these days are having drones make delivery of packages. And one of the things I thought was fascinating to learn about is, hey, Jodi, who do you think owns the air rights above our house?
To which I said, I don't know.
Michael, would you care to enlighten us as to who actually owns the air rights above our house?
Yeah, this is actually a really passionate subject for me. So I'll tell you a little pre-story. In 1946, there was a chicken farmer in North Carolina, Thomas Cosby, that had a chicken farm close to a military base. And when the military jets would take off, they were at a height of about 83 feet. They figured the flight was somewhere in around 360 feet. But when the jets would take off, it would scare his chickens, and they would fly into the wall and kill themselves. So Thomas Cosby sued the United States government about what is called navigational airspace rights. I have the first rights of X amount of feet over the property that I own. So the government agreed with him, said, yes, for the first 83 feet over your property, you have what's called navigational airspace rights. You have rights to, grow your crops, feed your family, and run your business. So that was 1942, I believe it was. Fast forward to now, where you have drones, where drones can pop down into the airspace and land on the ground. So the FAA rule is this, that from millimeters off the ground up, that is federally mandated and regulated airspace. They own the airspace, not you. So there is a gray area in our state and federal laws around the terminology of navigational airspace. How much do I own? Do I own? What are my rights? So these are all things that are being addressed. I know as part of my legislative work here in Texas around UAS and drone operations. And for those of you that don't know, UAS is Unmanned Aerial Systems. Drones is just the slang word. So, but they mean the same. So, government and local and federal are looking and trying to define what are navigational airspace rights. So this is a huge topic that's out there right now.
So what'll happen is one day, where this has happened already, if someone flies a drone over somebody else's property and they decide that they're going to shoot it down, the drone pilot's going to say, hey, you shot down my property and didn't have the right to do it. You need to pay me, because as Michael will tell you, these drones are they can get expensive. And then the other person is going to say, hey, wait a second, that's my property and you trespassed and you had video taking pictures of my chicken coop or whatever I have in my backyard. And that's kind of the issue.
Yeah,
And
and to add to that, so one, it's a federal offense to shoot down a drone with a gun. I'll throw that out there. The FAA classifies any drone as an aircraft, and it is a federal offense to shoot them down. Secondly, we've got a lawsuit that is on the books here in Texas, where the National Photographers Association has sued the state of Texas because we had two drone pilots that were taking images and videos of the new Texas Rangers ballpark that was being built here. And so the lawsuit came out about whose rights are this for you to fly in? Well, they referred back to the Texas statute laws, which were basically written about images and captures from a helicopter, not from an unmanned aircraft. So this this lawsuit is going on in the state of Texas right now. We're all trying to figure out where the direction it's going to head, because for me, the biggest problem in the state of Texas with our laws is the definition of aircraft. And I'm sure it's the same in other states too. Aircraft has typically been defined in our laws as manned aircraft, but now fast forward with drones, the law needs to be amended. So, and you run into these spots of, hey, do I have intellectual rights over my property and such? One thing I will say is that the FAA is very strict about is millimeters off the ground, you're regulated by federal airspace. But when you launch and land your drone from wherever you're at, do you have permissions of that property owner to launch and land from there? Because you have to have that, whether it's a public entity or it's a private person's residence. So a lot of people get into a lot of trouble with litigation around this.
I can see this becoming a bigger issue as you have people who aren't familiar with drones, who don't understand or know or might not even agree, but then also from a company perspective, because when you were talking about flying over the stadium, I'm thinking about other types of items. And now you start to have an IP issue too. What if that drone comes over and captures it and shares it,
Exactly.
think between two different competitors that might happen. So there's a lot that's here beyond just the backyard chickens.
Yeah, there is. But that story kind of gives you an understanding of the term navigational airspace.
Absolutely.
And what rights do we have? And you're right, intellectual property is a huge piece in our industry. I take the image. Is it my right? Is it the property owner's right? I mean, who owns it? So it's a really big picture.
so, Michael, another thing I'd love to have you talk more about is talk about the quality and the type of sensors that can collect data that can be put on a UAS these days.
Well, that's another interesting subject, because you have two versions of this. You have the shelf purchase drone that 99% of the people buy from Amazon and have it delivered, and then you have this whole other section of personal made drones. Those are a bigger issue with the sensors, because a lot of counter UAS detect and avoid equipment can't find them. But these sensors collect a lot of data. You're collecting from your gyroscope, your IMU, your compass, wind speed, telemetry, obstacles. All of this is just an optical eye to the data that it's collecting. So you've got two versions. You've got the ones that are off the shelf that collect the data, and then they run it through an app on your phone and collect it, up in the cloud someplace where it keeps a snapshot of where you're at and all the telemetry data that from the minute you've launched from that spot to back to landing again. So, and then the custom made ones, they collect the same data, but that doesn't go up into some public entity's cloud app. It's more of a communication between controller to drone in its own little network. So
how is that information used? So if all that information is collected from the sensors, what is done with it? And then as an individual, what types of choices exist?
Yeah, that's another one of the topics that I'd like to discuss. I'm very passionate about this industry, but with all the good that comes with technology, we have a dark side as well that happens. So, all of this data is collected in the cloud someplace that some company that has created that drone and their app, this data is sitting there, and if you look at some instances that have happened around cyber cities in the United States and who owns that data and how can it be sold and manipulated, it's the same thing with drones. This data is collected in the cloud. We really don't know what the data is being used for. We know that we can go back to that data and see how high, how fast, how long, battery, weather, GPS locations, a snapshot of that area, all of that telemetry data that the drones have collected, we can see that, okay? As to who else sees that and what's being used for that data, that's the huge question in this, that nobody really knows, or it's known, it's just not spoken about.
And that's why so many of our podcasts seem to have a regulatory bent to them, because what Michael does with drones, it's just another example of technology that's far outpace our laws to comprehend how the technology works, the kind of data that gets created. Because Michael, I think I saw you post something on LinkedIn just the other day about the use of a drone for traffic control above San Diego.
Yeah.
And so think about that drone that's taking the video over San Diego, but has the ability to have a camera that's good enough to know where Michael's driving every day. And maybe they want to sell that information to Starbucks because they want to sell Michael a latte before he's going to fly or whatever else. And that's, to me, how these issues, in this instance with drones, really come into sharp focus.
You're very right. And that one in San Diego is issuing speeding tickets. So just so people in Southern California know.
So are there any commercial purposes like Justin just I can't speak. Justin just described. That's very hard to say. with the Starbucks example. In other words, is that information, think about my location or that aerial information, is any of that being collected and used by a company and sold and shared for commercial purposes? You don't have to name companies. I'm just curious if there's any sort of known, yes, that is something that might be happening.
So think about this, okay? So that AI is the gold, okay? I learned that years ago in my years at Microsoft, that AI is the gold nugget. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to manipulate it to the way that they need it. So anybody that gets that data is using that data in some fashion to benefit financially, I believe. So your question is interesting because, if you look at what happened with the smart city in San Diego, and the story goes, and I don't really know all the minute details of the story other than the fact that the city decided to install all these cameras around San Diego, but they did not lock in the contract to say who owns the data. From what I understand, the data was shared out to Wall Street and other entities. So this is the kind of stuff that's out there. As for drones, that's hard to say because you've got drones now, Walmart's using them to deliver COVID testing kits. You've got Amazon, UPS, Google, they're all advancing in their deliveries. So, that's a difficult question for me to really answer. I don't know. I'm sure of it. An assumption would tell you somebody is, but I don't know a company per se.
I think the idea is this data is out there and people don't appreciate, with all the sensors and video cameras and how high quality they are, that this information is out there. And, AI is simply an algorithm to evaluate the data and reach conclusions faster or differently than we as humans might. So it stands to reason. And that, I think, is another reason why Michael's very involved in regulation in the state of Texas, that without regulation and rules around this, what do you think is going to happen with the gold, so to speak?
Well, someone will go and use the information, sell it, monetize it.
Yep. And they're doing that.
And what complicates it is if Michael's flying his drone and Jodi is on the highway on a public right of way, you really don't have an expectation of privacy, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't have rules around the data the drone collects and how the city or public entity might use the data. And if you listen to this podcast, you know what I'm working on, and it's the work that I feel has greater value than just the project I'm working on, because this to me is a fundamental societal issue. And David, or Michael, maybe you can talk a little bit about the work you've done with drones when it comes to when disasters happen and you're trying to rescue people, because people may not think about drones and how you can provide tremendous value that way.
True. I'm a senior member of the Civil Air Patrol, and I'm on the National UAS team. And I've flown a lot of disaster missions just on my own. And, it's an interesting environment because you're coming into a disaster area with that there's limited resources as it is. So you do not want to put any other burdens on that, for you to sustain. You want to be there to help. So it's interesting. I can take my drones and fly out, find a house, give the GPS coordinates to, manned aircraft, and they'll go out and pick up people that are at their house or whatever to help them. So, there are so many great things that drones can do. You got the Coast Guard and several other, parks and wildlife around the state. They're using drones to deliver life vests to people, so there are so many uses for emergency management and drones right now that it's just mind-boggling. You've got some entities that 911 here in the United States, you call them, they dispatch a drone to have eyes on site before anybody gets there, so they can accurately tell, do they need fire? Do they need police? What's going on? They've got eyes on. So for on these emergency sides, drones are phenomenal. They can do what manned aircraft can do for a third of the cost of what it would take to fly an aircraft around and do that.
So you hinted a little bit, but I was curious to know, what do you see as some of the future uses that you're hearing about, but maybe haven't quite taken off or are just starting to take off, where you'll see and hear more drones? So you mentioned some, being used for COVID-19 supplies.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of the police one before. So kind of those types of future use cases, if you could share a little bit about what you think is on the horizon.
When she says take off, pun is fully intended in this context.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Have my moments.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So there is so much out there. When I do public speaking in that, I tell people, if you've ever watched the Jetsons are being built out right now in our lifetime. And I'm fortunate.
Loved the Jetsons.
I did too. I did
watch
too.
the show all the time.
Jane, his wife. I did too. So I tell people, if you ever watched it, that's what's being built out right now. And I'm fortunate that in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we are dead center in the middle of it. We've got Uber Elevate that wants to use autonomous drones to carry people to 60 locations around the Dallas-Fort Worth as air taxis. We've got heavy lifting drones that are being invented to lift cargo cars 10 miles away from a airport facility. We've got law enforcement that are using them for search, surveillance, and everything, all the great things you do. We got Homeland Security flying our border right now here in Texas, using drones, protecting it and surveying it. Outside of that, I've seen some really other cool stuff. There's a company out of Austin that is making a personal hexacopter that you can sit in and fly it yourself. They hope to start production on that next year. There's an entity out of Utah that's made a drone motorcycle, and it's pretty interesting design. And then you've got, there's a couple gentlemen out of the UK that have created a Iron Man suit, so to speak. where they can fly in and around these type entities. So the technology is super cool. There is a lot on the horizon, and it's a change in our environment, and we're evolving in this technology lifestyle that we're in. So, and personal transportation is the next big thing on the horizon. Personal drones, package drones. We worked with the FAA and NASA to define unmanned traffic management rules for the skies to fit all of this type of aircraft in with manned aircraft. So there's a lot on the horizon for technology. It's a super exciting time.
So, as we start to wrap up today on a topic that I could talk hours for, is we'd love to know from your perspective, Michael, do you have a personal, when it comes to drones, cyber or privacy tip that you'd like to share from your years of experience?
Yeah, my biggest thing is I like any second level authentication that I can get, if it's offered. There's a lot of apps for the drones and that aren't out there. I think the smartest thing is know where you're at. I use a VPN connection everywhere I go. You just gotta protect those entities that you go on, and understand that with great technology and the convenience that it brings us, that there's a dark side in it as well too, and we have to be mindful of that.
So when you're not flying drones, what are you doing for fun? Because it sounds like drones are super, super fun. But in a non-drone fun activity, what might that be?
Well, the first of the list would have to be all my wife's honeydew stuff, because I've been traveling so much. So I have to take care of that first. So when I finally do get time to have fun, I've got a 1972 Ford F100 sidestep pickup truck that I've been restoring. So I like the old cars. I sold my 85 Vet a couple years ago that I had fully restored. I had my 1969 Camaro up to a few years back that I had since high school and restored. So I like to do that, something mechanical that I can just kind of detach my brain and grab a wrench and not think about it. So grab a good cigar, turn the radio on, and work on my truck. That's fun.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for your time today, Michael. And if people want to reach you and learn more about what you are doing, where can they do that?
So you can find me on my website of www.cumulusimaging.com. That's Cumulus, Cumulus, like the cloud, imaging.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff about the UAS industry. You can find me under Michael James Hill on LinkedIn. Love to talk with anybody about drones and cybersecurity, and I love these things. And thank you guys so much for having me on your program today. This is something I'm passionate about, around security and how do we secure it and still enjoy our lives. So keep up the great things you guys are doing.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show. We really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you.
Yep. Have a great day. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you.